What are some of the different addictions that were portrayed in the movie?
In 28 Days, it was a movie about addictions, and at the rehab facility that Sandra Bullock's character Gwen was at, there were people struggling with addiction to alcohol, drugs, gambling, and sex. Usually, the decisions by the addicts in their day-to-day lives had a negative effect on those around them, whether it be family members or people they had relationships with. One example with Gwen was she was drinking and using drugs on her sister's wedding day, and that led to some negative decisions as she wrecked the cake and also stole the limousine and drove it into a house. In Gwen's case, her mother was an alcoholic when Gwen was a child, and that had a negative effect on her childhood. And then in Gwen's adult life, her boyfriend Jasper was an enabler as he pushed her to drink, and then while she was in rehab, he would bring her drugs and try and take her away from rehab and get her to relapse. The facility provided a store that sold cigarettes, candy, gum, chocolates, different things to kind of ease the addicts away from their more abusive drugs to get them something to fill the void, whether that be heroin addicts who crave chocolate or people who usually are doing drugs, something to do with gum, candy, or smoking. There were a couple different situations that the movie showed us for addicts when they left rehab. There was a man in the rehab center who left and then came back. He relapsed and had to come back to rehab just a few days later. Gwen's roommate actually overdosed. She was about time for her to leave rehab, and she did drugs one more time and she killed herself. And then there's the situation with Gwen where she went back out into the real world and had to cut ties with people who had a negative influence on her life, like her boyfriend Jasper. But she also had to take other steps, whether that be taking care of a plant or a pet, like the rehab center suggested, before she could get back to living a normal addict-free life. In the movie Philadelphia, what were some of the initial stereotypes displayed by Joe Miller about AIDS patients?
Well, basically, he was afraid to be around them. He was afraid of catching AIDS because back then there was less they had less education about it. So he thought that it could maybe be spread airborne, and maybe it was easier to catch. Well, it started with vomiting and diarrhea, and also he shortly after that he had lesions that popped up around his face and other places, and those really stand out. He didn't want people to know that he had AIDS because it was looked down upon, because it was seen as just a homophobic disease. And also it could hinder the work that he was doing. Well, basically, he was sort of shunned throughout the movie. People, when they saw what was wrong with him, they were afraid to be near him. They didn't want to catch the disease, and also he was looked down upon for his practices in the gay community. And also, he probably wouldn't have got fired from his job because now there's more equality, and even when you have a disease that might hinder your work, he still has a chance to do his job. So that would probably be a little bit better for him today. It was mainly support for him because he already had AIDS and there wasn't much medical treatment. So it was mainly just social treatment. He had there was a support group of other AIDS patients, and they gave him support just by being there for him and sharing some of their stories. His partner, he didn't have AIDS, but he was sympathetic for him for having AIDS, and he did everything he could to keep him, pretty much keep him sane through the process. Legally, he was equal to any of us, but socially, people were, he was, like I said, he was looked down upon, and also since it could hinder his job, that was part of the reason why he was fired in the first place. And the legal system knew that was wrong, but it was sort of pushing for the public opinion to feel the same way, because as a society we do sympathize for him, but we just have to get there first and push through some of the stereotypes that are associated with AIDS.